So I'm going to be talking to you guys today about refugees and how that ties into multiculturalism and education. Now I'm going to be concentrating more on personal experiences and conversations that I've had with actual refugee family that I've spoken to. And the reason I'm doing that rather than concentrating on academic sources is that what better way to learn and connect and help students than actually talking to them rather than relying solely on academic sources. Now I will obviously source academic content in my written portion of this, but for the presentation I'm going to rely on personal experience and conversations. Now you may wonder why I'm walking on a windy, cold, full day here next to the river. That's actually intentional. It's in solidarity with Ukrainians, because the refugees that I've chosen to talk about are Ukrainians. And the connection to the river is that while media has concentrated on showing destruction and rubble in their images of Kiev and other cities across Ukraine, what I've seen in the more recent months is that Ukrainians are posting pictures of the river flowing through the city and undamaged buildings in the background. And I see that as a sense of pride and hope, showing that the city and the country isn't as crushed as Russians would have you believe. So I spoke to this family of Ukrainian refugees who came through the Canadian program to bring Ukrainian refugees in. And what I found, or what I wanted to find out, is what education was like for them in Ukraine and first impressions of education here in Canada. Now, what I expected to hear was that they had challenges academically keeping up with the content and faced barriers with the language. But what I actually found was very different. What they told me is that in Ukraine, they started with quite difficult academic content early on. And they thought that the first few years, even up to 6th grade in Canada, were playing. And even in later years, like in senior high, that there was a lot of free time in order to be able to do their work. So academically, they didn't actually struggle. And even from a language aspect, because they'd learned English in school early on, they were able to keep up there. What they did have challenges with, though, is they had learned in a very structured setting with criteria and were taught not to question. So when they had to write papers about academic topics where they had to express their own opinions and thoughts, they were hesitant in doing that because back home it would have maybe come off as questioning the teacher's authority and or knowledge. So you can imagine that that would be difficult for them to try and work on assignments like that. The other bigger aspect, though, is the social aspect. And this is where maybe language came into play a bit more, because even though they were able to speak English, they weren't necessarily able to get into conversation and discussions with their peers because they didn't feel comfortable talking about their own experiences in English because they didn't have the right words to use. And this is where I want to kind of touch on my own experience. As a multilingual speaking 4 languages, I can express certain things very well in different languages, and there may be certain expressions or feelings and emotions that I have from an early age that I could express really well in Swedish, but not in English. Because that's when I learned it, and it impacted my vocabulary and my language. And those words might not even be existing in English to be able to express that emotion. And that's what these students were feeling, is that they couldn't express themselves with certain aspects that a lot of their peers are asking a lot of questions about, and therefore had a hard time getting socially involved and making friends. So my question to you would be, as teachers in this situation, obviously it's fairly easy to add academic content that the students could fill up their time to engage them in class and keep their minds working and learning. But what can we do from a social aspect to have these kids become a part of the community and a part of the school and really engage in other aspects that way? And is it our responsibility as teachers only to educate, or are we also there to bring students in from a social aspect and have them feel comfortable there as well? So I'll reword these questions for you a bit better for our discussion, and we'll get right into that.